Not bad, not bad.
Make too much noise in the house to get thrown out.
All right, so Rav Sharaga's conclusion was that unless you're grazing your goats in the desert or on your own property, that like you live on a farm, there's really you're really not allowed to own a goat in a private backyard because your goat's going to be intrusive into other people's property. And so let's just do the footnote here. He says, "Uvashailos teshuvas yabia omer." That I'm not sure. In Gilyanot Rabbeinu Hagadol Zatzal, that talks about Rabbeinu Hagadol. Again, I mean, I know this is referring to Avadia Yosef, but I'm not sure which. I think it's talking about historical events. Kosov Besov Chele Gimel Sheshuv Ra'a Lakama Poskim Shehelu Kidvarav. He notes a number of poskim that go like Rav Sharaga. The Kvar Kosov Kein Hagarach Rav Palaji, Besifro Artzot HaChayim. Rav Palaji, a very prominent Sephardi posek, I think of either the late 19th or early 20th century, writes, Bezel Shono. He writes, Va'ata dezachinu biyamenu, dihigbir hasar hagadol, that he says, today the great communal leader Moshe Montefiore, Kana Sados La'orko L'Rachba, Mishum Yishuv Eretz Yisrael Livnot V'Lintoa. He's purchased a huge number of fields for planting and building, and that's what Sir Moses Montefiore did. In Kain Chazer Hadin L'Sinai Shia Nohig Din Zeh Shel Isser Gidol Behemadaka. He says, so the halacha that would prohibit us from raising small farm animals should apply once again today. Ad kan l'shana. B'chein kasav b'shut shevet halevi, Rav Vosner, v'hevi sham shadas hakaftor v'ferach, isha iser zeshayach be'eretz Yisrael gam bizman she'en yishuv Yehudim sham. He says that even when there are not Jews living there, this prohibition will still apply. Because of the Inmaran HaBeis Yosef HaYara Dvarav Lo Haya Mekel Bazeh B'Pshitus. And he writes that the Mechaber, just watch your step, would never have been lenient to say that it doesn't apply had he known this psak. We're going to skip the brackets. V'siyem hashibole haleket shebechol ofen bizman hazeh sheruba deminkar miyoshve Eretz Yisrael hem Yehudim. He says that nowadays, where most of the people who live in Eretz Yisrael are Jews, Chazar din zeli isuro b'chol pratav, then certainly nowadays the prohibition goes back. V'chein kasav b'shut devar Yehoshua, v'chein kasav hagrish el yashiv, b'shut kovetz tshuvos, le'esor. That they all say, all of these poskim rule that you're certainly not in the city, are you allowed to have a goat. The Cholak Sham al Divrei Hagoner of Tzi Pesach Frank even Shein Isser Zed Din Be'eretz Yisrael Kedei Shenomer Shabbato Le'Isser Zman Shelo Garu Sham Yehudim. He says this Isser of raising goats in Eretz Yisrael is not an Eretz Yisrael din per se, like Shemitah or like Trumas and Maasros. Ela Isser hu al HaYehudim b'chol makom sheyesham Yishuv Yehudi. But it's anywhere where there's a prevalent population of Jews. And that's why the Shulchan Aruch says this prohibition is extant in Bavel as well, in densely populated areas. And therefore, when Jews have come back en masse to Eretz Yisrael, the prohibition applies as well. So you can't say like Reb Pesach Frank that when the was no longer extant, it never goes back. And he says, I refer you to the Tzitz Eliezer. Apparently, he has some kind of rejoinder. And Me'idach, On the other hand, Matzanu b'shut shari chaim shevi tshuva mehagrach Kanievsky shlita shekasav sheshal shela zu lamar chazanish halacha lemaisa v'chazanish amar dekevet shulchan aruch itir mutar v'zeu kisparas agon rutzi Pesach Frank. Rav Kanievsky was lenient. He said, look, once the Shulchan Aruch says it's okay, then even though the reasoning of the Shulchan Aruch no longer applies, it's still okay. And apparently he was going like Rutzi Pesach Frank. He says, now, so therefore, you're left with this big machlokus in the poskim, but ulagabe cholim, he says, what if you need a goat because you need it for a sickness? What do you mean? You need goat milk. It's not so easy to get goat milk. So he says, Ein b'shut yabia omer shehela lahakil bazel yeladim cholim shetzrichim lishtot chalei ve'ez b'chol yom v'rotzim lagadel ez beveitam ein sham sheherich bazeh. He says, if it's for a sick person, there's room to be lenient. Let's say you have a sick child in the house, and the doctor says that the kid needs to drink goat milk every day. So then, I don't know if anyone prescribes that anymore.
And then it's Chalav Yisrael as well.
Today when people are lactose intolerant, or something like that, they have all these other kinds of milk. But, maybe there would be some condition.
Goat milk doesn't have lactose in it.
Right. Yeah.
So maybe they're just
Something else.
maybe they're just drinking it because they're lactose intolerant.
Yeah. So in the middle of that tshuva, he writes, "Umikiven shaharofa mitzuyim b'mafgia sherefuat hayeladim halalu al yedei kach niravadai sheish lismach al zeh lahakel ulahatir lagadol behemadaka." He says, if the doctors are also all in consensus, basically saying that this is how this child will get healthy again, then you can rely on those sides that are lenient to have a goat in your house or in like your backyard. But you have to watch over the goat. Make sure that it doesn't graze in someone else's yard. What?
I'm getting one today.
Yeah. Just don't tell your wife.
You'll bring it back to Jerusalem.
Shahol v'tikna midirabanan he v'takana midirabanan he ein lahachmer b'chei agama. He says because it's a rabbinic ordinance and you're dealing with a sick person, you don't have to worry. V'shayni oto chassid shikpido lab chaveirav bazeh mipnei shehaya adam chashuv v'yilmedu mimenu lahakal gam below chali v'chulei ayin sham. He apparently cites a case where they told this very pious individual, even though there was a situation of illness there, that he shouldn't have a goat. That's because he was so pious that they were worried that people would learn from him and get goats themselves. But under normal circumstances, if for sickness, we can be lenient. Okay, so that's,
If the concern is that the goat and the sheep are going to stray and eat somebody else's grass, that's what we're concerned about. Why don't they just ask them that you have to fence the animal?
So apparently it's not so easy because I never owned a goat, but I saw enough episodes of Green Acres.
Your experience.
Yeah, that's my
Mr. Haney's
right. So that's my experience of goats. But the goats eat hats, they eat fences, they jump. Okay. Yeah. Right.
Sheep on the
All right. Let's go on to the next tshuva. Okay. Hechalik b'mayim shehotziu hashchenim v'nishperu mishkafav v'shinav.
Rabbi,
Yes.
can we just, before we go, on this kind of not having small goats in Israel and mainly Jewish people there, why is that? Is there a discrimination against the non-Jews? Was that what it was?
Well, it's a good question. I sort of was hoping no one would ask that question.
Sorry, Rabbi. Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
We'll cut you off.
No. But seriously, the takana was directed towards protecting the assets of one's fellow Jews, which means it's not by definition that you're a ganef if you own a goat. It's because, like Doug was saying, there are ways to protect your neighbors, with your goat ownership. Chazal were especially sensitive to the assets of one's fellow Jews, that even if there's the possibility that something on your property could cause damage or theft to their property, they said, don't do it. But it was only directed towards Jews when you're living among Jews, not when you're living among non-Jews, where presumably they're going to own goats as well, right? So that's why the takana was only made when you're in densely populated Jewish areas. Does that answer your question? I hope.
I'll accept it.
What?
Thank you. I'll accept it.
Okay,
I had a
thank
couple
you.
of chickens when I was young.
You had a
Pets.
couple of chickens as
And they
pets.
made this purple fence. You go
Yeah.
They were into the into the roses.
Oh, they were your pets, huh?
Meanwhile,
All right.
chicken dealers got, these kids got chickens for pets.
Oh, your parents were chicken dealers. Yeah, that's right. Okay.
Did
Okay.
you name them?
Sure, we named
And then he ate them.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, this one's-
Did you learn how to?
This one's teeny penny.
Hi, Henriette. Yes. Henriette.
A lot of history. I don't know. Can't remember. The other name for 'em.
And
But my dad
where
took 'em
was this?
in the manor. Baptist manor. But then my dad took them down to Kensington. And every time he come, he'd show me two chickens. These are your chickens. For years. These are your chickens.
And you fell for it.
But they
Okay.
were long gone.
Hechalik b'mayim shehotziu hashchenim v'nishbru mishkafav v'shinav. So here's the shaila. A guy slips because the neighbor pours out water onto the sidewalk. Guy slips and his glasses and his teeth get broken. So classic slip and fall, PI case.
You sound clean your snow or your ice.
Next
There you go. Okay. All right, let's go through the shaila. Thank God I have no sidewalk in front of my house. Isha echat shatfa et hamirpeset shela, v'hamayim yardu mehamarze v'nishpechu al hamidracha. Okay, classic Israeli case, all right? Woman's washing her mirpeset, okay? Water runs off over from the mirpeset onto the sidewalk and spills onto the sidewalk. Echad mehashchenim avar sham. One of the neighbors is walking by. Vehefelik b'mayim, slips in the water. V'nishberu hamishkafayim shelo ushtei shinav. His glasses break and two of his teeth break. Ha'echad shein kavua v'hashniya shein totevet. One of them is one of his own teeth, and the other one is a denture. So, so now he's got either a denture or maybe an implant. I'm not sure. Is she obligated, the lady cleaning her merpeset? Does she have to pay for the damages? So this is classic, right? So we have a case of putting out a bore in Rishus Harabim. The Gemara talks about that. What would you argue? Could you argue that
What do you do when it rains?
what do you do when it rains? I guess people know they have to be careful because it's raining.
But for a board to be,
Block the
for
sidewalk.
you to be accountable for the board has been so deep. So the slipping, I wouldn't compare a pit to you compare it to the water to slipping with pool in the water.
Yeah, and
The
also
norm.
it's also like I was going to say that's the norm. I mean, everyone's washing, spilling out water.
Sponges are,
Right, right. Hamishna omeret b'masechet Bava Kama, hashofech mayim birshut harabim v'huzak bahen acher chayav b'nisko. So the Mishnah in Bava Kama says that if a person pours water into a public thoroughfare and someone else gets damaged as a result, then the person who poured the water is liable. Umaran b'shulchan aruch pasak hashofech mayim birshut harabim v'nitnefu bahem kelev shel chavero patur. But the Shulchan Aruch writes that if you pour water out into a public thoroughfare and someone's clothing gets dirty, then you're patur for paying for the cleaning costs. So what's the difference? Va'afal pishu hu asa bor b'rishus harabim. You made a semblance of a bor in rishus harabim. Afilu hachi potter minizkei kelim shenigrumu machmas habor. Shenemar batoris is because there's a distinction in the Torah between what gets damaged, whether it's the person himself or whether it's his utensils. It says, V'chi yiftach ish bor, o ki yichre ish bor v'lo yichasenu, v'nafal shama shor o chamor, bal habor yishalem, kesef yashiv liva alav. If a person opens up a pit or if he digs a pit and fails to cover it, and a shor or a chamor falls into the pit, the owner of the pit must pay. He must make restitution. V'dorshu rabotenu shor v'lo adam chamor v'lo kelim. But the Gemara interprets from there that it's only an animal that you own. Your chattel that is living is what you're chayiv to pay for, because the two examples are shor or chamor. So this excludes a human being who gets damaged, and it excludes utensils that get damaged, not inanimate utensils. Mikan amru, naflu tochabor shor v'kela v'nishtabru. So from here, our sages learn that if an animal of yours, let's say your donkey or your ox, is carrying utensils on its back, it's carrying a stack of jugs on its back, and it falls into the bore that you dug. So chamor v'kela v'nishtabru, chamor v'kela v'nitkaru, or a donkey is transporting textiles, and it falls into the pit, and the textiles get damaged and torn. Chayev al habehema upater al hakelim. So you're liable to pay for the damage to the animal, but you're exempt from the damage that occurs to the utensils. So here's the thing. This is a bore. Okay, it's analogous to a bore. However, there's limited liability for a bore. You're only liable for damage to animals. You're not liable for damage to human beings or damage to inanimate objects that are damaged as a result because they were transported there by an animate possession. So let's take a look. Umasher dorshu shor v'lo adam, haynu dafka imeta adam, az patur bal habor, kevin shah pasuk medaber b'inyan mita. He says the only time you're not liable for damage to a human being is if the human being dies. Okay, because there the Torah is talking about the death of the animal. Shenamar v'hameti yelo, because that's the context. Avol b'nizkei adam chayv balabor l'shan. But if the person breaks his arm, then you are liable. You're just not liable for cases of death, but you're liable for cases of injury. Avol b'nizkei kelim balabor poter ki shviratan zuhi mitatan. But for broken utensils, you're going to be poter because that's like the death of the utensil when it breaks. Okay, v'lachein. Therefore, al hamishkafayim shenishperu haisha petura keven shehin kelim. He says for your pair of glasses that broke, she's putter from paying for the glasses because that's like an inanimate object. Aval chayevet l'shalim al hashein keven shezen niskei adam, but she has to pay for the tooth. So we're gonna talk about it. Okay. Yeah. She's exempt from paying for the inanimate object. It's a personal effect, but she's still putter. And that's why, like, if you slip and fall and it ruins your suit, she's going to be putter from that. But if you're black and blue and you injure yourself, that she has to cover. Well, we're not saying, there are certain things that for grama you're chayiv and certain things for grama you're putter. So generally speaking, grama b'nezikin is putter. Causative damage makes you putter midine adam, But midine shamayim, you still have a sense of liability.
So what happens if the person was reading a sefer and wasn't watching when he was walking and he slipped on the one at that point?
Well, there could be some negligence on his part. Yeah. So again,
Not our case,
how much, how, yeah, how, in other words, I guess Wayne's saying, what am I doing reading a sefer? That's never gonna, yeah. So, the question, of course, is what should not the person have realized that there's water on the ground? I don't know. You know, a lot of times, most times, water doesn't make you slip and fall. Like if it's got to be really cold and it's icy, so then you slip and fall. Okay, but anyway, Ela diyesh ladun al hashen hashniya shehi totevet. Hayim dina kegufa adam v'yechayev o dina kekli upatur. What about a denture? Is that considered to be part of your body? Or is it considered to be a kli and you're going to be patur? V'lichora, all right, Marv, any precedent in Canadian law?
Reminds me of whether it's a fixture or a chassis, right? It's kind of like the implant would probably be part of you. And the denture you can take out, to me, is like the cleat.
What if it's, if it's affixed with, the dental glue, whatever it is,
That's good. I mean, in secular, we don't have that problem. You're liable for damage to, if you're liable for the kalim and for the.
Oh, you're liable for everything.
Yeah.
We'll
All the
separate
consequential damages, indirect, you'd be liable for that if you were negligent.
Okay,
But I'm not
But-
sure if slipping on a puddle from water is, unreasonable.
You would be liable if it were rain, though, would it?
No,
No.
yeah, it's like.
You
like
have
where
to
I was
do
saying,
something
ice,
that-
Ice, snow, stuff like that you would be a hazard or something like that.
What about any artificial reason?
Yeah, although there are grocery stores like Sobeys and stuff where there are cases where someone's dropped a grape or a banana peel, the old story, right, so on the banana peel, you could be liable for stuff like that. But it would have to be unreasonable, substandard, not expected, someone also not paying attention could be contributory negligence, right?
Or
They gotta pay attention.
Would it make a difference if it was inside or outside the store? In the
Yeah.
case of that, with the
Yeah, it makes a
it
difference.
would, right?
Also, the stores are usually not liable if they have a maintenance program, like every hour they have someone sweeping the floor or something like this. And then like in the middle of the hour, someone slips in Sobeys, they're probably not liable for, that kind of thing. If they have a maintenance, program.
They do what they can.
They do what they can, so they act
Reasonable.
reasonably, right, exactly. Didn't change it for 5 days and people dropping stuff and. Probably.
okay. So let's see what the status of the denture is. Hayim dina kegufa adam v'yachayev o dina kekli upater. V'lichora yesh lahaviraya shedavar shemechubar legufa adam hu lo kemo gufa adam. On the one hand, you might be able to argue that even though it's attached to a person's body, it's not like their body. Mehad denechleku haposkim hayimuter lishtamish bekotsev leiv shalmeit. Are you allowed to use the kotsev leiv of a dead person? Now, what is the kotsev leiv? Give me a second. Let's look up this term. Yeah. I have no idea what that is. Pacemaker.
This is a defibrillator.
Pacemaker. There you go.
Makes sense.
Are you allowed to use, let's say a guy passes away and you want to harvest his pacemaker? Those things are expensive and you want to reuse it. I don't know. How would you feel about using a used pacemaker?
Chris, what do you think? You're using it just to replace like.
Well, I mean, the doctor says,
$50 for this.
This is all we got.
that's right.
The last guy just died. So
Yeah.
we got this.
But he died from something else, don't worry about the pacemaker.
They got a discount on this one.
Okay. So on the one hand, ki harei guf hamet aser bahana, kamo shenifsak b'shulchan aruch. He says to use body parts from a cadaver is aser. Now, there are exceptions to this case. if the only way to save a person's life is to use body parts, so then it's permitted.
Like kidneys.
Right, but if there's two equally viable options, like a used pacemaker versus a new pacemaker, and we are going to deem the old pacemaker as a part of the old person's body, so then that would be a consideration. So he says, Ki b'shut minchas Yitzchak pasak, the hakotzev leiv aser ba'ana, umashma duhu nechshav chelak migufo. He says, the Minchas Yitzchak paskins that the pacemaker that was implanted in the first person's body is considered to be part of his body, and therefore you're not allowed to use it. Mikol makom kvar herich b'zeh b'shut yabia oimer ki yad Hashem hatoiva alav lahatir adavar haven de'enza nechshav chelak miguf hamet mamash ve'al ken hu lo nesar bahana la'achar misa. Rav Ovadia held that it was permitted to use a used pacemaker. And I can certainly imagine this, let's say in the era of socialized medicine, and a person doesn't have any money, and he wants to save money. They tell him, like Doug said, the pacemaker was put in a week ago, and then unfortunately the guy passed away from something else, so it's perfectly fine. So, go ahead and use it. That's what Rav Ovadia paskined. So apparently, it's not so clear.
So then are we treating the pacemaker as part of it, like an organ of the person, or are we treating it as something outside?
That's right. So the Minchas Yitzchak paskind that a denture is like a part of the person's body. So let's say back in the old days, they would also use old, deceased people's dentures and then just reuse them, which to me sounds pretty gnarly, yeah. But that's so the Pischei Tshuva had paskin that you're not supposed to do that.
Yeah, the choice you had steak, we had somebody else's teeth. Which one do you want?
Yeah.
No steak or somebody else's teeth?
Okay. Anyway, v'im kain l'chor gam benidon didan hashem hatotevet nechshav kekli v'lo keguf ha'adam, and therefore, at least according to Rav Ovadia, the denture is considered to be a kli, and it's not like the body of the person. V'lochein ha'isha petura, and therefore she's going to be exempt. Aval me'idach yesh lomar sheme'achar v'hashetel kavua b'birgayim u'mechuber la'etzem. Oh, now he's really getting advanced. He's talking about an implant where it's the shetel. I guess there's. Let me just get the exact translation. The screw, yeah. The shetel.
So like permanently affixed.
The graft, he says, is kavua b'birgayim, has been fixed in screws. U'mechuber la'etzem, and it's attached to the bone, the actual facial jaw. Dino kegufa adam. So then it has the din of the body, and you'd have to pay. He says, because maybe even the people who hold, like Rav Ovadia, that a pacemaker is not like the person's body, would agree that when it's mamish screwed into the bone, then it is like the body. So we'd have to distinguish between a denture and an implant. And
would an implant in the ground be the same thing?
Perhaps. Now, in the footnote he writes, we'll have to hold it here because we're out of time. But let's wish it Seischem L'Shalom to Moish. We won't see you for a couple of weeks. All right, everything should go well. And, we'll learn in your Zuchus tomorrow. And all right, have a great day, everybody. Over now.